Welcome to the works. This is part 3 of the MCM Nightstand build. If you haven't watched part 1 or 2, make sure to check out those videos linked in the top right corner of the screen. I'm making good progress on this build, and today we'll finally get the cabinets glued together, the legs attached, and I'll make the drawer faces and boxes. Without any fancy joinery machines or dowel marking jigs, I want to set the placement of the cabinet sides using dowel centers and a few clamps. There are easier jigs for this, but I spend all of my money on fancy wood and hardware for this cabinet. Blew the dust off this doohickey, and we'll see how it does. After the holes are transferred, I use a hand drill press to keep my drill straight, and more importantly, to give me a precise depth stop. This would be doable on any drill press as well. My dowels are too long, and instead of re-drilling the panels, I'll chop them down with a pole saw. Don't cut your fingers here. They kind of look like dowels, but they're in fact not. I put down some painter's tape to protect the veneer of the plywood, as it stains easily and can be hard to sand the glue out without exposing the plywood underneath. The first step is to spread glue on all of the surfaces of the joints. Dry joints are bad joints. I chose not to use any metal fasteners here because it is a freestanding cabinet and I didn't want any screw heads or joints to show on finished surfaces. It would be possible to screw and plug the holes after, but I went with glue. The corner clamps help align the joints and hold them upright while glue is applied. It also helps force the joints together. They don't really hold the cabinet square, so I suggest taking them off after the main clamps are installed and double checking everything afterwards. The critical dimension here is the drawer opening. For an even reveal and ease of installing the drawer slides, be sure to make this opening square. We also need the top to sit flush with the sides, and minor adjustments can be made by changing the length of the top support brackets. Once the cabinet is glued and clamped, installing the top brackets are next. Make sure they are square at the sides and that they don't protrude above the sides. A clamp installed will hold them in place while the pocket holes tighten into the sides. While I wait for the glue to dry, I cut the drawer fronts to the right length on the radial arm saw and prepare for glue up by running the boards through the planer. These were bought surfaced 4 sides and have already been squared, but I will joint one edge just for the glue up. A few passes with the planer reveals a beautiful grain. The density of this board is like no other wood. It planes really nicely and doesn't have any tear out. This is a South American wood and it has several different names such as amaranth. Use dust collection and a mask while working with this, as the purple dust seems to travel everywhere and it can cause skin and other irritation. Another feature is that it has almost twice the density of maple and is known for dulling cutters. And if the cutters heat up, they pull out sap from the wood and gum up the blades. How fun. Needless to say, I probably won't be making any more drawers with this wood. Purple Heart is a very hard and heavy wood and also stains very badly with glue. Don't get the glue anywhere you don't want it. I would suggest cleaning out the squeeze off immediately. Sanding the glue stains on Purple Heart is also very difficult. Clamp the pieces together to get an oversized panel for your drawer face, then cut to size later once the cabinet has been fully assembled. I wanted to make a design with pizzazz and didn't want to spend any more money on walnut, so I used what I had on hand. With the cabinet dried, I used a chisel to clean out the glue lines. Most of these are in places that won't be visible, so I let them harden. It also let me get cool action shots like these. Cleaning off the glue helps the leg brackets sit flush. I use the edge of the plywood as a reference for aligning the brackets. Again, 3/4 inch from the front, parallel with the edge of the cabinet here. Seems to give me good results. Now these are 11-degree brackets. I got them from Lee Valley. Oops. They seem to be the best quality option I could find. There was some Amazon 48 packs, but I've had bad luck with the hardware from Amazon. Now the backs I'm only setting back from the edge 1/4 inch because it's, oh shit. This was the back. Well, see what happens. These numbers are all just made up anyway. I'll put this on my side of the bed, so if there ever was a catastrophic failure and it gets traced back to this 1/2 inch difference in the leg position, it'll just take me out. My wife will go on. Oh! That was my toe. I'm gonna preemptively take this one off. I am learning. Now I don't like to tighten them all the way. Lets me fine tune all the other ones. Once I get them all started, then I'll tighten them up.
Does mean I have to move my legs around though. I put the pretty ones in the front, and the ones with a lot of sapwood in the back. They're gonna have a lot of shadows on them anyway, underneath the cabinet. I was just using wood I had. This stuff's expensive. I don't really mind the look of the sapwood either. It's kind of like a chocolate milkshake. Which reminds me, lunchtime. Guess I know what I'm making when I go inside. Come on. All right, let's do a little switcheroo here. That's what I like about these legs. They have a nice machine thread. I can just put them wherever I want. If one of them snaps off in a freak accident traced back to my half-inch mismeasurement, I can easily replace it. Oh, well, someone can easily replace it. Probably won't be me. Because, you know, freak accident and everything. There we go. Beautiful. Let's flip it over, see how it looks. Now we're moving on to the second cabinet and installing all 4 legs on the bottom of this one. I'm using the same amount of setback, which is 3/4 of an inch from the front, and I'm making it parallel with the edge of this side. I tested it on that one and I have no stability issues. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this one. I think our battery's dead. Great. There goes that plan. All right, now we're going back to Colonial Williamsburg here with a hand screwdriver. I haven't used one of these in a while. Surprised I still know which way to turn. That was a joke, by the way. Here's a little tip for you. If you're ever confused about which way to turn, you take your right hand, only your right hand. This won't work with your left hand, unless it's a left-handed screw. Then it will work with your left hand. But either way, you point your thumb in the direction you want the screw to go, and you curl your fingers in, just like that, and that's the direction you turn. So I point down where I want my screw to go, I turn clockwise. That's how I know every time.
With all 8 legs installed, I check for any more glue squeeze out and clean up the remainder. This will be a partially concealed area, but I'll not have any quality escapes in this shop. Sanding montage, take 25. With high confidence that the design will work as is, I sanded all the glue lines off the top of the cabinets. Starting with 60 grit, I worked my way up to 120. Because I need to handle all these and drill holes in the bottom for mounting, I didn't want to sand till the final grit of 220. Before finishing, when everything is installed, I will sand the whole cabinet to 220 to remove any scratches or dings from handling. I've already taken off the high spots with the plane. Sanding won't be too time consuming at this point. To finish up the edges, they can be cut to final length on the table saw, and then routed over. I went over the edges with a 1/8 inch round over bit. This is important as my wife is accident prone, and measures such as these reduce my legal liability. A piece of scrap wood on the end helps prevent blowout and gives the bearing a little more travel. The roundover bit doesn't leave a perfect finish, but hand sanding will clean up any leftover marks. The trim router is useful here as the tops are fairly large. This could be done at a router table, but there will need to be a lot of infeed and outfeed support. My only complaint is that the dust collection of the handheld router is fairly poor. Installing the top requires a set of 1/4 inch holes which connect to the top support brackets and the walnut top. There needs to be slack in the connection to allow for wood movement in the top, as plywood and solid wood expand at different rates. Transferring the slotted holes to the top will let me drill the holes on the bench rather than finagling a drill inside the drawer. The drill I used was the same size as the shank of the lag bolt. I can't afford to have this top split from the lag bolts. No, really, this wood is really expensive. Large pilot holes give plenty of space for the bolt to enter the wood, but still allow for thread engagement. I used this same mounting strategy on the entryway bench I made and have not had any issues so far. A fender washer stops the bolt head from grabbing the wood and keeps the head out of the slot. Again, I'm using my hand drill press for the depth stop mechanism as I don't want to blow through the top of the cabinet. After drilling the holes and flipping the cabinet over, it's time to finally attach the top. I'm using beeswax and linseed oil as a lubricant here, and I want the screws to go in easy and prevent the splitting of the wood. I'm using a 3/8 inch ratchet and extension to drive the screws into the cabinet. I tighten the bolts from the middle first, then the ones on the outside. It's important to not over tighten the bolts as this won't allow the wood to move freely. I snug the bolt to the washer, then added 1/4 turn of the ratchet. Moving on to the Purple Heart fronts, I need to take off the glue line from the... Moving on to the Purple Heart fronts, I needed to take off the glue line from the boards to sand them quicker. It's probably best to run them through the planer to get rid of any glue stains, but I was happy to just sand. The final assembly of this project is the drawer box. To build it, I used 1/2 inch walnut that was resawn from the same material as the top. I'm ripping them all down to the height required by the instructions in the soft mount drawers. Now it's time to cut a dado for the plywood to sit inside the box. I was originally going to use the router bit that I have here, but it's exactly 1/4 inch and my plywood is quite undersized, so
If I use this dado blade, I'll have a much tighter fit and be able to dial in the thickness of the plywood exactly.
Changing the ripping blade out for the dado blade takes some effort with this saw. Since I'm using a 6-inch dado, I need to remove my dust collection shroud and splitter assembly. One of the many drawbacks of an exterior motor table saw. I do a test cut to make sure my blade is set to the right depth and the fence position will give enough clearance for the drawer slides. Then I attach a feather board to keep the depth of the dado consistent. I would have used a second one, but my miter slot was in a strange position and I didn't want to readjust the fence. Repeat the cuts once on every piece, then run it through a second time after adjusting the fence for the width of the bottom panel. This table saw is a Rigid TS2424 and was bought secondhand on Facebook Marketplace. It has been essential during our house renovation and for every project I've done. I upgraded it as I went along and added a 4-inch dust collection and shroud to the rear. It has a full splitter and anti-kickback pawls which make up for the lack of riving knife, but it makes attaching an outfeed table difficult. The Vega fence was a replacement that I took off a donor table saw that I also purchased on Facebook. Emerson made these saws for Craftsman and Rigid, and they were sold under many different model names, but all share the same parts. The fronts and the backs need to be the same length, so I'm cutting all 4 at the same time on the Radial Arm saw. Then I do the same for the sides. This will help keep the boxes square. This saw was actually free, and all I had to do was replace the motor bearings. It has plenty of power and a negative tooth blade, but can still be a little scary sometimes. This tool is probably from mid-60s and is one of the old Stanley Black & Decker or DeWalt power shops. I chose to use pocket hole screws to put the box together because I didn't have the proper bits for joining on the Incra LS. I used a Massca pocket hole jig and set it up for 1/2 inch material. I also used a fine threaded hardwood screw for the assembly of the boxes. All of the pieces are cut. It is time to put the boxes together. The goal is to hide the pocket hole screws and make the sides seamless. I glued each joint for extra assurance and used clamps to hold the pieces together while the screws went in. I used a strap clamp to hold the whole thing together square and to help hold it in place while the pocket holes went in. Set your drill clutch to be really weak here, as driving these screws too far will split the wood and cause it to poke out the other side. I hope you enjoyed this part of the series and were able to appreciate the amount of work that has gone into making these nightstands with videos. There will be one more part of this series, as I still need to cut notches for the slides and attach the faces. Then I'll go into the details about how I finished the whole nightstand. Thanks for watching. Leave some comments down below, like get a haircut, button your shirt, or maybe even nice job. Subscribe if you want to get notifications on the next video, and leave a like if you are enjoying these videos. Bye!